האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov, good evening, Dobra Vietcher. We are in the Zera Shimshon. This week is Parshas Devarim, but with Tisha B'Av coming up, we're going to do a piece on Eicha. In some of the texts of the Zera Shimshon, it says this is on kinos. So whether your particular Zera Shimshon talks has a section on kinos or a section on Eicha, this is Os Zion, section number 7. Let us go right into the text of the Zera Shimshon. Midrash Rabbah Parshas Emor. Zera Shimshon opens with a statement from the Midrash Rabbah in Vayikra Parshas Emor. Rabbi Yochanan have mitayel. Rabbi Yochanan was taking a walk. He was traveling. Solik mi Tiveria litziporin, and he was going up from Tiveria to Tziporin. V'havi Rabbi Chia bar Abba masmichle. Rabbi Chia bar Abba was supporting him. So Rabbi Chia bar Abba was walking along with him and supporting him, helping Rabbi Yochanan walk this distance. Muton chad bechakal. They approached a certain field. Omar, Rabbi Yochanan said, Hadein bechakel have didi. That particular field used to be mine. Vizabenis yase, and I sold it. Kidei lemezke be'oraisa, in order to merit studying Torah, meaning in order not to have to leave the Beis Medrash and the yeshiva to make money, I sold this field in order to keep studying Torah. V'chule, the Zera Shimshon says, etc., but it's important to know what comes next. They kept walking. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Chia bar Abba kept walking, and they came to a vineyard. And Rabbi Yochanan, this is the part of the Medrash that is not quoted here. Rabbi Yochanan said, this particular vineyard used to be mine, and I sold it in order to keep studying Torah. Then they walked further, and they came to an olive grove. And Rabbi Yochanan said the same thing. This olive grove used to belong to me, and I sold it in order to study Torah. So Rabbi Yochanan was explaining along their travels that he had sold a tremendous amount of land, of agricultural land, in order to be able to study Torah. Now back to the text of the Medrash and the Zera Shimshon. Shorei Rabbi Chia Bachi. Rabbi Chia started crying. Amir Rabbi Yochanan said to him, Ma'at Bachi, what are you crying about? Amar Lei, he said to him, Rabbi Chia bar Abba said to Rabbi Yochanan, Al deloi shavat l'sevusech klum. I'm crying because you didn't leave anything for your old age. You had all this beautiful, wonderful property, and you've told me that you sold it all, and that's admirable, of course, that you, of course, wanted to devote your life to Torah, but now you're an older person, and you didn't leave any of this land that could have helped with your support, that could have helped with to take care of you in your old age. Amar le, Rabbi Yochanan said to him, Kala hi be'einecha masha asisi. Is it light? Is it insignificant in your eyes what I did? Shemacharti dovar shenivra, that I sold something that was created lishisha yomim, in 6 days. We've moved now to the column on the left. V'kanisi dover sheniten la'arbayim yom, and I was able to buy something, to purchase, to get something, to acquire something that was given after 40 days. Ad kan lishono, until here is a quote from the Midrash Rabbah. So Rabbi Yochanan answered Rabbi Chia bar Abba and said, you shouldn't cry, you shouldn't be unhappy, because the things that I sold, the possessions that I sold, were created like all of the elements of this world in the 6 days by Hashem when he created the universe. But the Torah that I was able to acquire by selling those possessions, that it took Moshe Rabbeinu 40 days, 40 is much more than 6, 40 days to receive the Torah. Let's move into the next paragraph. Yesh ledakdek. We need to analyze, and here the Zera Shimshon is going to pose three questions. Ma hayesos svoroso shel Rabbi Chia shehizchil livkos. What was the reasoning of Rabbi Chia, who began to cry, la'achar she'amar lo she'mocher hakol b'shvil haTorah, after Rabbi Yochanan told him that he had sold all of this property, all of these fields and orchards and groves in order to study Torah? Wouldn't Rabbi Chia bar Abba agree that the Torah is more chashuv, more important than worldly possessions? So that's question number one. Right from the start, why did Rabbi Chia bar Abba take things so hard and feel so badly that Rabbi Yochanan sold his land in order to study Torah? Wouldn't Rabbi Chia bar Abba agree that the study of Torah is the most important thing, and acquiring Torah is the most important thing that a person can do? So what was his problem? That's question number one. Ve'od, and another question, she'im Rabbi Chia eino modelo b'svara zo. If Rabbi Chia, in fact, did not agree to that principle, to that concept, im kain, if so, ma mesaretz lo Rabbi Yochanan. What was Rabbi Yochanan answering? Kala hi be'einecha, is it insignificant in your eye? Shemacharti dover shenivra, that I sold something that was created. Next page, column on the right. L'shisha yomim, in 6 days. V'ho afu yodea zeh. Rabbi Chia bar Abba knew that. There's no doubt that Rabbi Chia bar Abba, who was a great sage, a great Amora, sage of the time of the Gemara, knew how the Torah was, the Torah that Bereshis tells us the world was created in 6 days, and Moshe Rabbeinu went up and took 40 days to receive the Torah. So what was Rabbi Yochanan, well, how was his answer going to help explain anything to Rabbi Chia bar Abba, when Rabbi Chia bar Abba, of course, knew that already? Va'af al pichein hikshelo. And even though Rabbi Chia bar Abba knew the math, he could do the math, nonetheless, he had asked the question, "Delo shavak l'sevusech klum," you haven't saved anything for your old age. It bothered Rabbi Chia bar Abba that Rabbi Yochanan had sold all his land. Ve'od, and another question, the third question, Ma ichpasim nivra l'shisha yomim ola arboyim yom. What difference does it make if one thing was created in 6 days and the other thing took 40 days? Umashayach inyan zelakan. What's the relevance of that here to this incident, to this story? What in other words, what was Rabbi Yochanan, what was the real meaning? What was Rabbi Yochanan really saying when he answered and he said, don't you see that I sold something created in 6 days and I was able to acquire something that took 40 days, that was given only after 40 days? What did Rabbi Yochanan really mean, and how did it truly answer Rabbi Chia bar Abba's question? So basically, these three questions of the Zera Shimshon are all ways of saying there must be more to the story than meets the eye. The Medrash Rabbah brings us this interesting story about a conversation between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Chia bar Abba, but there must be more to it. Something was going on in this story more than what we thought when we read it a few moments ago. Next paragraph. V'yesh lomar, and we can say, Shegam Rabbi Chia haya yodea, shahatorah. Rabbi Chia, of course, knew shahatorah, that the Torah yikorahi mipininim, that the Torah is more precious than fine jewels or pearls. V'chol chafotzecha lo yishvu va. And all of the things that a person wants to inquire in life are not equal to the Torah. You can see that that's a pasuk from Mishlei. So Rabbi Chia bar Abba knew how precious and valuable and how the Torah was more valuable than any kind of worldly possessions. He knew that. Aval keneged zeh, but corresponding, or you might say opposite this idea, ksiv krachrina, there's another pasuk. This is a pasuk from Devarim that comes from the section, one of the sections in the Torah that talks about Shemitah. Efes ki lo yeh b'cha evyon. However, there should not be among you a poor person. And Rabbi Chia understood that pasuk to mean that a person, every person, should do everything he or she can to make sure not to become destitute. It's not, the Torah is not just saying a statement or a prophecy or a prediction that there won't be poor people. It's actually incumbent upon us to do everything we can to save ourselves from becoming poor. V'kaim malon, and we hold she'ein lo le'adam lismoch al hanes. A person is not allowed, Chazal say this in many places, a person is not allowed to rely on a miracle. We can't get rid of all of our possessions and expect Hashem to take care of us. That's what Rabbi Chia bar Abba thought. Umikol shkein le'ezikna. How much more so is this idea true when a person becomes older, when a person's elderly? We need to prepare for our old age. We can't just assume, oh, I'll rely on Hashem to take care of me in my old age. If that's going to require a miracle, then we're not supposed to rely on a miracle. The Amrinim b'Meseches Nida, as Chazal say in the Gemara of Meseches Nida, Kevan shenitku shinov shel adam, when a person reaches the stage of life that his teeth fall out, nitku mizonosov, his food becomes reduced. Uperish Rashi on that Gemara says, shenitku shinov shel adam, a person's teeth fall out, machmas zikna. The Gemara means when a person becomes very old and their teeth begin to fall out. Nitku mizonosov, the person's food becomes reduced. Kashim lovo, it is hard for sustenance to come to the person. It's not easy for elderly people to get the sustenance and food that they need. Adkan Lishono, until here is a quote from the Gemara in Nida. So you see, the Chazal talked about the fact that as a person gets older, it becomes harder for them to have the food and the nourishment that they need. V'im kain, back to the text, and if so, lama lo shavak l'sevusech klum. Rabbi Chia bar Abba was saying, Rabbi Yochanan, why didn't you leave anything for yourself, for your old age? You sold all of your fields, you sold all of your possessions, and you haven't left anything for your old age. And I understand how, of course I agree how important Torah study is. Of course I agree that Torah study is more precious and valuable than any material possession. However, Rabbi Chia bar Abba said, we all have to take care of arrangements in our life so that we have the ability to have what we need to take care of ourselves in our old age without relying on a miracle. So that was how Rabbi Yochanan explains Rabbi Chia bar Abba's reasoning of his question to Rabbi Yochanan. Next paragraph. Ve'im tomar, and if you say, this is still Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Zera Shimshon explaining Rabbi Chia bar Abba's reasoning. And if you say, shenis yaresa pen, and that you were afraid that maybe im yishar lechasa achas, Rabbi Yochanan, if you say that you were afraid that if you had kept possession of sada achas, of one field, ha you gorem lecholif ami me'at tirda b'machashaftecha, it could have caused you to be somewhat distracted in your thinking. Kedichsiv, as the pasuk in Koheles says, melech l'sada ne'evad, even a king is obligated to the field. The pasuk in Koheles very strikingly says, even a melech thinks about his property and his real estate and his fields, and is not free from those worries. So if that's the case, maybe Rabbi Yochanan, maybe you were worried that if you kept a field, it would be distracting and you'd be worried about it. How are the crops going? Is it getting enough water, et cetera, et cetera? Umachmas osa hatirda, and because of that distress or distraction, hayisa mafsid lahavineze davar b'liman Torah, you might have been worried that you would have lost the ability to, and the time and energy to understand a certain part of Torah learning. If that was your concern, Rabbi Yochanan halo kroksiv, there's another pasuk in Mishlei that says, Ki Hashem yitein chochma. Hashem gives wisdom. Ultimately, we, of course, have to try as hard as we can to study Torah and acquire Torah knowledge and Torah wisdom. But it's up to Hashem to decide if we acquire Torah knowledge. Ubevadai, certainly, therefore, shekevon shasisa kol ma sheroi lasos. Certainly, Rabbi Chia bar Abba said to Rabbi Yochanan, once you have done everything possible that you could do to study Torah, umacharta kol hamoisar mikidei chayecha, and you would have sold all of your property except that which you needed to live on. Min hashamayim hoyu me'irim einecha b'Torah. From Shamayim, Hashem would have made sure that you understood all of the things you needed to learn in Torah. And you would not have, in fact, lost anything from your learning. So Rabbi Chia bar Abba, his question, which was a simple 3 or 4 words, we see the Zera Shimshon has spent 2 paragraphs explaining what was behind the assumptions behind Rabbi Chia bar Abba's questions and what was behind it. So now, Rabbi Chia, this second paragraph we just read explains that Rabbi Chia bar Abba not only made the point to Rabbi Yochanan that he should have felt an obligation to provide for his old age by saving at least enough of his land to be able to do that, and he shouldn't have relied on a miracle to have somehow have sustenance from somewhere when he became elderly, and instead of that, he should have kept some land. And then Rabbi Chia bar Abba said to Rabbi Yochanan, and even if you tell me that had you kept a little bit of land, just enough for your old age, for the needs of your old age, that would have distracted you from learning, and you wouldn't have been able to successfully understand and acquire a certain amount of Torah knowledge. So Rabbi Chia bar Abba says, I have an answer to that as well, based on a pasuk in Mishlei. Hashem gives us chachma, and therefore Hashem would have made sure that you understood everything, even though you had a certain amount of limited distraction because of this field, this one part of the field that you could have preserved. So that's where Rabbi Chia bar Abba was coming from, which of course is very strong, sounds very strong now that the Zera Shimshon has put it all out there for us. Top of the next column. Rabbi Yochanan heishiv lo, and Rabbi Yochanan responded to Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Hello, is it not true? Afilu ledevarecha, even according to your words, even according to your argument, Rabbi Chia bar Abba, hoyeli lismoch al hanes shel chaste amokum, I would have had to rely on a miracle from the kindness of Hashem, sheyoyer einai bisoroso, that he should illuminate my eyes in his Torah. In other words, I would have had to say to Hashem, I was distracted, I was taken away from my Torah study for a certain amount of time. Therefore, there are things I don't understand. Hashem, please help me. Please do a miracle and help me understand and make up for the time that I lost. And now that I sold everything, I'm also relying on a miracle from Hashem, sheyachin mizonosai, that he will make sure that I have sustenance and food to eat. So Rabbi Yochanan answered Rabbi Chia bar Abba, your whole point to me is that a person shouldn't rely on a miracle, and I should not have relied on a miracle to have food and sustenance in my old age, and I should have preserved some of my land for that purpose. However, you followed it up. You agreed that if I had land, I'd be distracted. If I'm distracted, I'm not going to study Torah with the same ability and intensity and perseverance. I'm going to have to spend some time with my property, dealing with my property. So again, I'm going to have to ask for the miracle from Hashem. So either way, I have to ask for special kindness, special blessing from Hashem. V'yoser kal sheyavo'u li hamizonos, and it's easier. Rabbi Yochanan says it's easier for me to receive sustenance she'enam kol kach chashuvim, which are not so valuable, Shahare nivru b'shisha yomim bilvad, because all the food that I would need to eat, like everything else that's material in this world, was created in 6 days. Miliftoach al hanei sheyor einai b'soroso. It's easier to get sustenance than it is to trust on the miracle that Hashem would open my eyes and illuminate them in Torah that I wasn't able to study or wasn't able to study with the same level of intensity. Shehi yukara harbe, the Torah is much more precious, much harder to acquire. Shenitna la'arboyim yom, because it was given only after 40 days. So that's what Rabbi Yochanan was saying back to Rabbi Chia bar Abba. He was saying, your entire approach, when we think it through, is basically saying, don't rely on a miracle and leave over land to take care of my old age, and rely on Hashem to make sure that my Torah knowledge is full and complete, even though I would have been distracted. I'd rather rely on Hashem for my sustenance. If I have to rely on Hashem for something supernatural, something miraculous, some special chesed and kindness, I'd rather rely on Hashem for sustenance in old age than rely on Hashem to fill in my Torah knowledge, which is yoser chashuva, which is more valuable and more precious and harder to acquire than sustenance. Next paragraph. So just to pause, because the Zera Shimshon is about to bring in a different Gemara and ask a question from it. Just to pause for the moment. So now the Zera Shimshon has explained for us Rabbi Yochanan's response to Rabbi Chia bar Abba. So we understand in a deeper way what Rabbi Chia bar Abba was really saying and why he challenged Rabbi Chia, why he cried and posed the question to Rabbi Yochanan about not leaving anything over for his old age. And we understand what Rabbi Yochanan said back to him and why he talked about the 6 days versus the 40 days as a way of saying if it's easier to acquire sustenance than it is to acquire Torah. Next paragraph. And that which we say in the 5th chapter of Maseches Ksubas, a very unusual and fascinating story is coming up that we'll see how it's related. Rabbi Yochanan solik bedarga. Rabbi Yochanan was going up, was ascending steps. V'havusam chilei Rabbi Ami v'Rebbi Asi. And he was being supported by 2 of his famous students, Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi. Ifchis darga tute, the step under him broke. So they're helping Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi are helping Rabbi Yochanan go up the steps, and the step under Rabbi Yochanan breaks. Salik ve'askinhu. Rabbi Yochanan continued going up, and he brought them up with him. So he supported them and stopped them, prevented them from falling, and helped them go up the rest of the steps. Omrei le Rabbanon. So the rabbis who witnessed this said to Rabbi Yochanan, V'chi me'achar dehachi, after we see this, loma le lemismeche. Why do you need support? Rabbi Yochanan, you just carried Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi up the last steps after the step broke. Why do you need them? Obviously, you don't need anyone to help you go up the steps. You're very strong. You're very powerful. Why were they supporting you? Omar Lahu, he said to them, Im kain ma aniach le'ezikna. If so, meaning if I didn't have these students of mine to support me, what strength would I be leaving for my old age? I would be using up my physical strength, and it wouldn't be present when I need it when I'm older. So here the implied question is, actually the Zera Shimshon continues and he'll explain the question. Uperish Rashi explains on that Gemara in Maseches Ksubas, in Cain, if so, she'atish kochi v'lo yismachuni. Rabbi Yochanan said, if I'm going to use up and reduce my strength and not have these students support me, Ma'aniach koach ba'atzmi. What strength am I leaving for myself? Lishtamesh bo le'ezikna, to use, to preserve, and to save for my old age. Ad kan lishono, until here is a quote from Rashi. Dishma mino, we learn from this Gemara, this story in the Gemara, Sha'af Rabbi Yochanan hayachoshesh lahaniach le'ezikna. Even Rabbi Yochanan himself had the consideration of preserving strength and leaving things over for his old age. So this is a problem, because Rabbi Chia bar Abba's whole point to Rabbi Yochanan was, why did you sell all your property and not leave anything over to support you in your old age? And Rabbi Yochanan answered and said, nope, I sold everything because I'm okay relying on Hashem to preserve me in my old age. But here in the Gemara in Ksubas, Rabbi Yochanan apparently did not feel that way. Rabbi Yochanan said, I ask my students to help support me when I go up steps or do other physically challenging things, because I need to preserve and save my strength for my old age. So there seems to be a contradiction. Yesh lomar, the last paragraph, we can say, to Rabbi Yochanan have makbid lehaniach kocho le'ezikna. Rabbi Yochanan was careful to preserve strength for his old age, mishum shahatorah nikres tushia, because the Torah in Navi is referred to with the word tushia, with the simple meaning of the pshat meaning of that word is wisdom. But there's another meaning from Chazal coming up, shemateshes kocho shel adam. You can see based on a Gemara in Sanhedrin. Why is Torah called Tushia? Well, because not only is Torah wisdom, the ultimate wisdom, but it also weakens the strength of a man, which is connected to the word grammatically Tushia. Torah weakens a person. Intense study and devotion to Torah study can physically weaken a person. Mishum hachi, because of this, hayu mishtadel sheyiskayim bo kocho. Rabbi Yochanan tried hard to preserve his strength, kedei shelo lehislachesh yoser midai le'ezikna, in order that he wouldn't be too weak in his old age, she'ozlo hayayochol o lasok batorah, because then he would no longer be able to involve himself in intensive Torah study. So Zera Shimshon says, you might think in the Gemara in Ksubas we have a contradiction, because Rabbi Yochanan didn't save his fields. He wasn't worried about saving his money for sustenance. But then we see he was worried about preserving his strength. So Rabbi Yochanan says, no, it's all the same thing. Rabbi Yochanan's whole point that we see from the story from the Medrash Rabbah in the beginning, with walking with Rabbi Chia bar Abba, he said, I main thing I want to do is study Torah, and I'm not going to rely on Hashem to give me the knowledge and understanding of Torah. That I'm worried about and I won't do. I'll try not to do, but I will take a chance with sustenance, because I want to be totally devoted to understanding Torah and not take chances with Torah study. Happens to be the Gemara in Ksubas is saying the same thing, because Rabbi Yochanan said, I need preserve my physical strength when I can for my old age, so that I can study Torah in my old age, because Torah study weakens a person. And after a lifetime of Torah study, Rabbi Yochanan knew he would be weakened physically, in addition to the reduction in strength that comes from old age. And therefore, in both sources, Rabbi Yochanan's point was to focus on Torah study and devoting all of his strength and effort to Torah study, and making sure that he did everything he could do during his lifetime, to accomplish, to attain as much Torah knowledge and wisdom to Shia as possible. So in this piece in the Zera Shimshon, as we approach Tisha B'Av, we certainly can take away the incredible value of Torah study that we see was represented and demonstrated to us as an eternal role model by Rabbi Yochanan. Of course, on Tisha B'Av, there are times when we can't study Torah, but the idea is to commit ourselves to increase Torah study as a way of bringing back the favor of Hashem to ourselves and to the Jewish people, so that this will be our last Tisha B'Av in Golus, and God willing, we will be redeemed, and the time of Mashiach will come speedily in our days. Yasher Koach for joining in the learning in the Zera Shimshon this week. We look forward, B'ezras Hashem, to learning again in the Zera Shimshon next week.